Welcome back to the Githyanki Battle Mage. We are discussing Githyanki War Mage with a little bit of fighter thrown in and using it in melee combat. So we have done levels 1 through 4 and now we're going to look at level 5. Now for a number of reasons, level 5 might be a disappointing level for this character because all the other martial characters are now starting to get their second attack. We're not going to get a second attack with this character, but we do actually get a number of things at level 5, and I still think we're going to be offensively in line with those characters. So at level 5, we're going to be level 4 as a wizard now. We get our ability score improvement, and we absolutely want the Warcaster feat here. So Warcaster works really nicely with this character because, as I said, we wanted a character with the versatility to use sword and shield or a two-handed weapon, and now we have that. So now we can basically use any magical shield, any magical weapon that we happen to come across effectively. Unlike a lot of other martial melee characters, we're not going to be pigeonholed into doing either sword and shield or two-handed weapon. We can use whatever comes up, and we can use it effectively. We are now going to have advantage on our concentration saving throws after taking damage. Remember again, we're proficient in constitution saving throws, and we can boost it by another +4 with our arcane deflection ability. So concentration is pretty well protected with this character. We can also now perform a spell as an opportunity attack. And what spell are we going to want to cast? We're going to want to cast Booming Blade. We don't have Booming Blade yet. Now we want it. This is the sweet spot for this character because now we can have Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, and we're bringing in Booming Blade just as it becomes good. And we no longer need to perform the somatic components of spells when we have a weapon and shield. So again, we're creating that versatility. We can now use weapon shield, we can now use two-handed weapon, we can do our Booming Blade with our opportunity attacks, and we're almost never going to fail concentration saving throws. So this feat just really brings in everything for this character. So we get an additional cantrip at this level. The timing is perfect here. And this is one of the advantage of doing fighter first is that we're going to get this additional cantrip exactly where we need it to be. So this is the point we want Booming Blade. We're going to be able to use Booming Blade more effectively. We'll go over that in a moment. But also we can use it for opportunity attacks. Opportunity attacks are usually brought about because somebody does movement. So that means that with a Booming Blade, we can pretty much be guaranteed to get our secondary damage on top of it. Never mind the fact that all our cantrips just scaled. So Booming Blade is going to do an additional 3d8 damage to that character. So going into our second level spells, we're going to have two more selections. I think the choices here are reasonably obvious. The first one I'm going to take is Mirror Image. So Mirror Image is just another way to layer up our defenses because we already have a pretty good defense. We're wearing heavy armor. Ideally at this point, maybe we have plate mail armor and maybe even ideally magical plate mail armor. Who knows? But our armor class is not bad. We have the option now to use a shield, so we can actually make our armor class quite good if that's the option we want to take. In addition, we can throw a shield spell on top of that. We can throw arcane deflection on top of that. In addition to that, we can pile on a mirror image, doesn't use our concentration, and it can turn attacks against us into automatic misses. The other spell I think is reasonably obvious for us is Dark Vision, because Githyankis do not have Dark Vision, but Dark Vision gives us a long duration Dark Vision that does not use our concentration. Not necessarily something I need to cast all the time, but it's there when I do need it. And finally, this character can now cast Misty Step once a day. And that's the main reason why I didn't take Misty Step is I can already use it once a day. Now I can only use it once a day, but it doesn't use a spell slot. So I can be using my Flaming Sphere and my Misty Step and my Booming Blade. So I'm going to be going into combat. I'm going to be using my Flaming Sphere to hit the enemy. Then I'm going to go in, I'm going to hit with my Booming Blade, and I can potentially even Misty Step away, forcing that enemy that they might want to move, number one, to get away from the Flaming Sphere, and number two, to get to my character, so then they can get the additional damage from the Booming Blade. And yes, Flaming Sphere and Booming Blade work great together because it's really hard to get the secondary damage off of Flaming Sphere. We hit creatures with our bonus action, and then all they have to do is move before the end of their next turn, and they're not going to take the additional damage at the end of their turn. But if you hit them with the Booming Blade and they're next to a Flaming Sphere, that's the hard choice for them. They're either going to take the secondary Booming Blade damage or they're going to take the secondary Flaming Sphere damage, and it's their choice. The Flaming Sphere damage is less damage, so they're probably better off just sticking where they are and just taking that Flaming Sphere damage twice, making Flaming Sphere really nice here. But again, if we Misty Step away, we might have it in a situation where they need to move to get to somebody. So we can really pile on the damage here. And our Green Flame Blade, let's not ignore it because it has also scaled as well. So it is also doing a lot more damage. And if we have an enemy with somebody adjacent to them, it's automatic. We don't have to worry about it. So what kind of damage do we actually get from this character? And our average damage for this level comes in around 26 points. Now our baseline damage, based on the calculating average damage video I did a while ago, the baseline damage that I use for 5th level is about 16.5. So this character is well above the baseline for damage. We have a great armor class, we have great hit points, we have great saving throws, so we're really kind of bringing it in everywhere. We even have a great initiative, even though we didn't focus on our dexterity. So bringing this wizard to level 5, now we're going to get access to our 3rd level spells. This is now a 6th level character. So with our 3rd level spells, what I want to do here is, number 1, I want to take a ritual. And the ritual I'm going to take is Leomund's Tiny Hut. Again, this shouldn't be a surprise. And then what I want to do is I want to take a big gun spell. And the big gun spell I want to take is Fear. And I could take, again, Hypnotic Pattern or Sleet Storm or any of those ones that we've talked about many times. One thing I like about Fear with this guy is I'm already in melee, and you know that the cones can be hard to place because often they originate from you, and if you have party members between you and the enemy, it's hard to avoid the party members. But it's a lot easier if we're in front of the party members. So then all we have to do is maybe back up and then blast a Fear spell. Fear, of course, I've talked about Fear lots of times. Fear is a good big gun spell because we can affect many enemies with it. It covers a large amount of squares, and they only get one saving throw. So if they fail their saving throw, they keep on going. Now, you could also potentially take something like Fireball with this character, and it would be fine as well. So at 6th level, this is what my preparations look like. So I have my cantrips. For 1st level, I just have Absorb Elements, False Life, and Shield prepared. So these are all defensive spells, defensive boosts. And I'm probably going to be using all my 1st level slots every day. And now normally with the wizard I might worry about casting False Life too much because I might run out of shield spells. But if this character does run out of shield spells, at least we have Arcane Deflection to fall back on. Now I have all my 2nd level spells prepared. Dark Vision, Flaming Sphere, Mirror Image, and Web. I should note that Dark Vision is something that I'm not always going to be casting. So it's just there in case I need it. Flaming Sphere I will be casting a lot. Mirror Image, if I can prepare for a combat, definitely want to use it. I'm not sure I would use it in the first round of combat. And then Web, especially if I'm stuck at range, is a great way to entangle a bunch of enemies. But if I want to hit multiple enemies that are closer in, Fear is probably my better option. I can hit a bigger area and they only get one saving throw. Now I will mention there is another option too. If we really want to focus on single target damage, we can upcast our Flaming Sphere and it will do 3d6 damage instead of 2d6 damage. And if we have enough rounds of combat, that will pay off. So with level 6, we're now going to get our next ability for War Mage. So the level 6 ability for War Mage is Power Surge, and it's basically going to pick our 3rd level spells for us. So the way it works is starting at 6th level, you can store magical energy within yourself to later empower your damaging spells. What are our damaging spells? Well, Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade are both damaging spells, so we can just use it to boost our regular melee damage. In its stored form, this energy is called a Power Surge. You can store a maximum number of power surges equal to your intelligence modifier. So for this character, that's currently 3. Whenever we finish a long rest, our number of power surges resets to 1. Whenever you successfully end a spell with a dispel magic or a counterspell, you gain 1 power surge as you steal magic from the spell you foiled. And if you end a short rest with no power surges, you gain 1 power surge. So we need to take Dispel Magic and Counterspell right now, because we want to be able to get as many power surges as we can. Once per turn, when you deal damage to a creature or an object with a wizard spell, you can spend 1 power surge to deal extra force damage to the target. The extra damage equals half your wizard level. So I don't want to oversell this because that's not a ton of damage. We're talking about 3 points of damage once per round with this ability, and only as many power surges as we have, which is often only going to be 1, but we can recover them in a number of different ways. But Counterspell and Dispel Magic are already good spells. So it's not a bad idea to take Dispel Magic anyway. And Counterspell we almost certainly were going to take at this level. So it makes sense to take them both just to take advantage of this. Again, it's not a huge bonus to damage, but when you take a spell that you might have considered already and you give it any boost at all, it's a good spell to take. So our spells choices for this level, Counterspell and Dispel Magic. Now, we only have one additional preparation, so we need to remove something. Now, the spells that I would probably choose from are either Dark Vision, because there are other ways to deal with this. You go into darkness, use a lantern, right? So Dark Vision is something we can work around. Mirror Image, because often we can't really cast it in the first round of combat, so we need to be able to prepare before a combat. Also, we have a number of strengths to our defense already. And then Web, because we have the Fear spell now. So we already have an Area of Effect spell that we can do that can affect multiple targets. So the one that I think I would get rid of is Dark Vision. And I'm still glad it's on my character sheet. If I know we're going to be adventuring something like in the Underdark or something, I'm going to find something else to get rid of and I'm going to prepare it. But I'm not going to prepare it all the time anymore. And that is going to give me the ability to prepare both Counterspell and Dispel Magic. And I'm going to use them whenever I can because I'm also going to get Power Surges from them. And a Power Surge, although it's not a big bonus to damage, it is just another bonus to damage because we are piling on the damage by layers. We have our Greatsword damage, which is already decent on its own. Then we add our Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade damage, which is going to add 1d8 more to that damage. Then we have the secondary damage of those spells that would add either 2d8 or a d8 plus 3. So another layer onto those. Then we have our Flaming Sphere, which is going to do another 2d6 or 3d6. So another layer onto those. And then now we are going to add on an occasional Power Surge for another plus 3. So once we start adding all these together, the damage is quite good, even though it's only a single attack that this character is doing. We're really doing 2 because we have a bonus action attack as well. So even though this character only has one attack with the attack action, we're really getting many different attacks combined into one. So now we take our wizard to level 7, and that gives us access to 4th level spells. Now, in the end, there are going to be 3 4th level spells that this character is really going to use effectively. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 4th level spells, and only one of them is one of those 3. And that one is Greater Invisibility. So Greater Invisibility is, again, going to boost both our offense and our defense. So now our character can go into melee, attack with advantage. We don't have to have a familiar to take care of that. There's no risk to our familiar anymore. We can now move away from enemies that may force them to take that secondary damage. And if they attack us, they now have disadvantage. So we're adding to our defense, to our offense, and our maneuverability. Perfect for this character. And the other one I'm going to take is Polymorph. This is not a spell I'm going to keep prepared up to higher levels, but at this level, Polymorph is still so good, it's worthy to take, and those other 2 spells that we're going to want, we'll just take them next level. So I want to prepare both my new 4th level spells, so that means I'm going to get rid of Web as a prepared spell at this point, and now I can prepare both Greater Invisibility and Polymorph. So when we move this character into level 9, we're now going to get our second ability score increase because we're increasing our wizard to level 8. So with our ability score increase, now is the time to start getting into intelligence. Because we just don't really need to worry about our concentration save anymore. We're already proficient. We already have advantage. We can already get a +4 on it. We're better than at concentration saves than any other of the wizard builds I've made so far. So we can now start focusing on intelligence, and that adds a lot to this character because we're not only adding to save DCs, but we're also adding to preparations, and you can see they're getting tight. And then we can also add to our initiative because this character gets their intelligence bonus to initiative. The only feat I would really consider here is potentially the alert feat, because of course it provides a number of advantages in addition to a +5 to initiative, so we could just kind of bump that on top of our already good initiative score. And another one I would consider is potentially raising our strength, because strength would increase our chance to hit with our melee attacks and our damage with our melee attacks. But I do think it gives you significantly less than intelligence, because we have a number of ways to get advantage on that attack, so we're probably hitting most of the time anyway, and +1 damage is nothing right now. We do so much more. We're probably going to do an additional +1 damage just on the fact that they're less likely to make their saving throw against the Flaming Sphere. So the 2 additional 4th level spells for me that are must-haves for this character. Number 1 is Dimension Door. Now we have Misty Step that gives us a short range teleport. We can only do it once per day. Can't take anyone else with us. So Dimension Door is really picking up our maneuverability. And the second one is Fire Shield. Now, Fire Shield isn't a spell I'm going to be using yet, but I want it because later on I'm going to be able to make a lot of use out of this. Now, if I'm going up against an enemy that I know is going to be using cold attacks or I know is going to be using fire attacks, I would prepare Fire Shield and cast it because it is going to give me resistance to that damage. And then if somebody actually hits us with a melee attack, they take 2d8 fire or cold damage depending on the shield type. Now, most creatures are not going to be hitting us. I don't expect this character to be hit a lot in combat, but they are up in melee, they are casting spells. It's reasonable to think they might be a target of many attacks. And if they are a target of many attacks, then some of them are going to hit. And if we have a Fire Shield up, that could potentially be a lot of extra damage. But Fire Shield uses our action to cast, so it's not something I want to be casting in combat. So here I'm going to want to prepare my Dimension Door, increases my maneuverability, allows me to bring somebody else along with me, and I'm going to prepare my Fire Shield. I don't necessarily expect to cast it a lot, but if I'm going up against somebody who I know is going to use fire or cold, it makes sense. Or if I'm going into a situation where I expect to be attacked many times, maybe that's the party composition where I'm the only one who goes forward and enemies all seem to attack me, then I definitely want to have Fire Shield prepared, and I want to cast it before combat as often as I can. Might even be worth it to cast it in the first round of combat. So at level 9, not a lot has changed from level 8. We still have our Polymorph prepared. We still have our Greater Invisibility prepared. Those are our major spells. We still have Fear prepared, which we will be using as a big gun spell still. And otherwise, our tactics haven't really changed, except that Fire Shield and Dimension Door are options. But that said, some of our mechanical boosts have just lifted. We have a better chance of achieving a counterspell or dispel magic because our intelligence is higher. We have a higher initiative because our intelligence is higher. And potentially we can store another power surge because our intelligence is higher. So we do get a couple of little advantages as well from having the higher intelligence. So level 10 is huge for this character for offense. So I'm going to go ahead and make our wizard level 9. And so we're going to get our 5th level spells now. And what we'll do with our 5th level spells is we're going to get the biggest offensive boost to single target we can get, and that is Animate Objects. So we're going to grab Animate Objects, and we're going to grab Wall of Force. Why Wall of Force? You know why Wall of Force if you've watched any other of the wizard builds. I pretty much always take Wall of Force, and I'm going to take it here again for the exact same reason. So Animate Objects allows us to animate 10 objects. Each of them can be tiny sized, +8 to hit, d4 +4 damage. So what that means is we're replacing our Flaming Sphere with Animate Objects. So now we're going into combat. We're attacking once with our Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, but then we're attacking 10 more times with Animate Objects. So now we have 11 attacks around. Now, one of the chief criticisms for Animate Objects is that a number of creatures are resistant to the damage of non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. And they are. There are a lot of creatures, especially at higher CRs, which we're getting into now, that have that resistance. So they would take half damage from an Animate Object spell. But I'm going to show you that it will actually still be a reasonable amount of damage, even if you didn't know that going into a combat. If you did know that going into a combat, you might want to save your Animate Objects for either a different target or a different combat. In terms of preparation, I want to prepare both my 5th level spells, so I'm going to get rid of Polymorph at this point. I got now the 3 4th level spells I want with this character, and I'll grab Animate Objects and Wall of Force. So if we calculate the damage of this character using a Booming Blade in combat, I said maybe a 50% chance of getting the secondary damage, and an Animate Objects in combat. Not counting anything like Power Surge or anything like that, I would expect the damage to be, on average, about 59 points of damage. Now, if the creature is resistant to the damage of the Animate Objects, it takes a big hit. We head down to 38.5 points of damage. So we actually lose more than 20 points of damage on average per round. but the baseline damage for a level 10 character using my system, 17.7 per round. So even if the creature is resistant to the damage of the animate objects, it's still adding over 20 points of damage to our average damage per round. So we still end up over doubling the baseline. So although, yes, animate objects is a lot worse against a creature that is resistant to the damage, it still actually adds a ton to the damage, and it still brings our damage over double the baseline. So it's not like it's useless in those cases. It's not like you wasted the spell. You're still going to bring your offense up to the levels that we would expect from the best martial characters. Now, animate objects, of course, is going to be a very limited resource. So in a combat where I expected a creature to be resistant, I would probably do a flaming sphere instead, and then I would save that animate objects for another combat. But if I am in the big end fight, animate objects, even if the big enemy is resistant, will still do more damage than a flaming sphere, unless you are getting them to take their secondary damage of the flaming sphere. I just wouldn't count on that. So this is the character at the end of tier 2. So we now are a fighter 1, wizard 9. With animate objects, we have an amazing offense. And when we don't use animate objects, our offense is still okay. We're still well over the baseline just by using something like a flaming sphere. And our defense is still strong. Our hit points are still strong. We can still use false life to boost them even more. So this character brings it in all the areas that we would expect from a melee character. Now, we have a lot less resources when it comes to being a wizard. Yes, we have a fear cone. Yes, we have a wall of force, but we don't have a lot of options there. If we're going to be using animate objects, then we're not using the wall of force. So we're really just talking about the fear spell, and that too is a limited resource. So we're doing a lot less wizardy stuff with this character, a lot more fightery stuff. But we are good at the fightery stuff. And magic is playing a huge part in what we're doing in that. So the feel of playing a magical character is coming across in a melee character. So that is the Battle Mage from levels 5 through 10. So that concludes the second part of this video. To look at the third part of this video, where we're going to go right to level 20, but I think the interesting part of the next video is just going to be the next level or two once we jump back into fighter. And then I'm going to show you what can be done with action surge. Anyway, there's going to be a link for that in the video description or in the comment section down below, or if you stick around to the end of this video, it'll be there as well. So I hope to see you soon.